Welcome to the Agave and Lime Show. I'm Ginger.
And I'm Salt.
And this is part 5 and the final episode of me telling Salt the entire plot of the Kdrama Lovely Runner. All the previous videos will be linked down below. I'm going to do a quick recap, but that's not enough to know what actually happened so far because so much has happened. So please go watch the previous videos first. Okay, let's dive right in. Our main character, Imsol, has been paralyzed by an accident and thinking of ending her life when she gets a call from a man on the radio who gives her hope to live again. That man, Sun Jae, is part of a newly debuted K-pop group called Eclipse, and Imsol becomes one of their first fans. Nearly 13 years later, Sun Jae dies, and Imsol finds a way to go back in time to save him, to 2008. After a lot of ups and downs, Imsol realizes that his death was actually because of her, and does her best to change the future. But her actions result in Sanjay getting attacked right now instead of 15 years later in 2023. The last episode, we left off with Imsol rushing to the cliff she saw in her vision, only to find Sanjay and the man fighting, and Sanjay has just been stabbed. The cops grab the man, but Sanjay falls backwards off the cliff. What do you think? Do you think Sanjay died?
I mean, he shouldn't have died. If you want the show to go on, the show must go on.
True. Does seem like he died after he falls in the water. There's blood coming out everywhere. It's now December 2023. It's been almost 1 full year since Imsol has returned to her time, because she was in Jan 2023 when she was doing the whole time travel thing. A lot of things have changed. Her entire family is still living in that apartment, but now her brother and best friend slash sister-in-law live with them with their 2 kids. Imsol's best friend used to regret not having worked because she was so desperate to get married earlier. But now she actually has a job and they work together. Imsol still works at Bond Cinema, but when she's driving to work, she sees a poster of Sanjay's friend advertising something. And she thinks about how it's not Sanjay and she misses him, but she's just trying to live her life like nothing has happened.
So Imsol hasn't realized yet that Sanjay has died or something has happened to him. She just thinks
We
he
don't-
didn't become famous.
No, as of right now, it seems like Sanjay is dead. That is the vibe so far. That is how they're making it seem. So, after she gets to work, Imsol gets called in by the boss. One of the actors working with them is refusing to film a kiss scene, and he refuses to continue working until they remove the kiss scene. Now, it's Imsol's responsibility to go over there and convince him to continue filming, because his agency supports all the actors' opinions, so it's Imsol's job now. But this is a romance movie. They can't remove the kiss scene. The director wants to replace him, but the production company was only able to get investors for the movie by using the actor's name, so they can't replace him. So Imsol rushes to the film set, and the actor's just sitting in a chair with multiple assistants around him, giving him massage, fanning him, just holding towels for him. He's also drinking alcohol out of a giant Stanley cup. She swallows her frustration and tries to convince him. She says, "Do you remember the name of our movie? It's Would You Like to Kiss? So how can we remove the kiss scene?" And he's like, "The title isn't We Kissed, so there's no need for a kiss scene." She keeps trying to convince him by saying it'll be a masterpiece, it'll go down in the history of Korean cinema. He still refuses. So she's like, "Okay, just tell me the reason. Tell me why you won't do it." He leans closer and whispers in her ear, "My girlfriend told me not to. She's the jealous type." Imsol's blood pressure is rising, and the actor just leaves the set. Imsol follows him out because he can't just leave. They haven't actually cancelled the shoot. He heads to his car and gets in the driver's seat. Imsol bends down to keep convincing him. She looks inside, and his girlfriend is in the passenger seat. She's really frustrated, and she keeps trying to talk him out of leaving, but he starts the engine. And Imsol realizes this guy's about to commit a crime because he was drinking earlier. And he's also got a passenger in the car. Imsol runs to her car, and as he's about to leave the parking lot, she cuts him off. Like, she drives in front of them and cuts him off with her own car. Naturally, Imsol ends up in the police station, also because apparently she was destined to frequent police stations in her 30s. And the lawyer for the actor wants her to apologize because they claim that the actor wanted to leave and she stopped him, which is true. She wants to tell the cops that's not the entire story, and she's about to mention the drinking, but her phone rings. It's her boss. Her boss tells Imsol, "You need to apologize." Imsol tries to explain the situation to her boss, but her boss just cuts her off saying, "We can't make this a big deal. His girlfriend was in the car. What if it turns into a dating scandal? Then our movie would get cancelled." Because apparently the price of being famous in Korea is that you have to die alone. Her boss hangs up, and Imsol apologizes, but the lawyer says, "I'm not the one you should be apologizing to." So Imsol's stuck writing an apology letter at the police station. When she hears someone making fun of her, she turns around, and Kim Tae-sung is inside the little holding cell nearby. Yeah, even I was confused for a second because I was like, is he now officially a criminal? But no, he's a cop now. He just likes to rest inside the lockup because apparently it's got perfect temperature and humidity. Afterwards, Kim Tae-sung takes Im-sol out to eat, and she gets really drunk while talking smack about her boss for making her apologize. And Kim Tae-sung is like, wait a second, I have an important question. Im-sol's waiting for the important question, and he says, wasn't his girlfriend that famous model? Why would she go for a guy like that when I'm around? He then looks to the side, and there's an ad on the wall with Baekhyuk, that's Sun Jae's best friend from Eclipse. And Kim Tae-sung says, I should have asked him to introduce me to her. Im-sol looks at the ad and sighs. Sun Jae used to be on that ad. So right now it does seem like he's very much not alive in this timeline. She then proceeds to get very drunk, despite Kim Tae-sung's protests, and he has to carry her home. And in the middle, he gets really tired because it starts snowing and there's no taxis. He sits her down on a bench. Im-sol wakes up from her drunken haze when she sees the snow and remembers Sun Jae stopping for her on the bridge and all the times he's confessed and been in love with her, and she starts crying. She's saying his name, and Kim Tae-sung just consoles her. He's just holding his hand up, blocking the snow for her. And he's just waiting for her to be done crying. And it does seem like Sun Jae is dead so far. The next day, her boss calls her in, and the first thing she says is, I'm firing that actor. Im-sol is really shocked, and she's like, what do you mean? You said we would lose our investors. But her boss says, if the movie gets cancelled, it'll be because of his personal issues, so we can sue them for damages. Why didn't you tell me earlier that the idiot was drinking before he got in the car? Im-sol tells her that the boss told Im-sol to stay quiet before she could explain. Her boss actually apologizes to her. She actually says, I'm sorry. Side note, Im-sol's boss is like a very typical boss in terms of how she behaves, but when she makes a mistake, she actually apologizes and she really cares about her subordinates.
So that's a good thing.
Yeah, she seems like a very modern and woke kind of boss. And then her boss says, I'm going to look at your script again. So Im-sol actually submitted a script earlier, but her boss rejected it, saying there's too much going on and it's hard to tell what genre it is. But now her boss says, I think we can make something out of it if we really focus on the romance, so revise it and send it to me by tomorrow. Im-sol's really happy, hands her the budget proposal she was holding, and leaves. Im-sol tells her best friend the news, and they're celebrating when Im-sol remembers something. Last night, when she got completely drunk with Kim Tae-sung, he dumped her at home, and she was still ranting about her boss, to herself, to the walls of her room, I guess. So she decided to write a resignation letter. I'm gonna read it out to you. Super duper quick-witted. You once said that was the perfect way to describe me. If that's the kind of employee I am, how could you do this to me? You're so cringe. For the first time ever, I'm writing a resignation letter. I had great dreams when I joined, but instead of working on films, I'm only catering to celebrities and their egos. You don't pay me nearly enough to deal with all this crap. I'm too old to be writing apology letters at the police station. I hope you find someone who's more super duper quick-witted than I am. If you want me to stay, you should be focusing on persuading me, not some punk like that actor. It's been crappy to work with you, and I hope we never meet again. Get lost and have a good life. Goodbye and good riddance.
So now Im-sol's task is to sort of stop her boss from seeing this message or receiving it.
Yeah. So after she wrote the resignation letter, she put it in a red envelope and put it in the folder that she gave her boss the next day. And then she passed out drunk. The next day she woke up, she didn't remember. She just handed the folder to her boss. So her boss assumes that Im-sol heard about her accepting Im-sol's proposal earlier from someone else and wrote a thank you note in advance and secretly put it in the budget folder. So the boss puts it in her purse thinking, I'll read it later. Im-sol recalls what she wrote in the letter and she wants to get it back, but the boss has already left the office. And the boss is now at some award show at a hotel. So Im-sol heads to the hotel and spies on the ceremony. There's a bunch of people dressed in fancy clothes everywhere, and she finally sees her boss across the room. Im-sol wants to head right over, but she doesn't know what to say or how to explain her presence. So she decides, I'm going to steal the letter. So she sneaks in by walking next to a waiter with a bar cart, and then she grabs a drink and hides behind a couple of supermodels who are way taller than her, and finally makes her way to the table where her boss left her purse. She grabs the purse, but her boss is nearby talking to someone, so she quickly grabs a flower instead to hide her face and hides under the table. She looks down, realizes she brought the flower with her, but not the purse, reaches out her hand from underneath the table and grabs the purse, sneaks out again.
Someone stops her.
No. Im-sol goes out of the room where the ceremony is being held and opens the purse and finally finds the letter. It doesn't seem to have been opened yet. Im-sol heaves a huge sigh of relief, turns around and heads up the stairs because she was standing near the stairs. She heads up the stairs because she needs to put the purse back. when she knocks into someone. The man reaches out to grab her to keep her from falling, and she looks up and sees,
it's Sun Jae.
yeah, guess he's alive. So, of course, he's alive because the show would be over if he was dead. But what really happened was when Imsol was in the past for the final time and things went horribly wrong and he got stabbed, he actually did die when he fell off the cliff and into the water. He did. Afterwards, like, they're at the bottom of the cliff, they recover his body, and obviously it's been a while. He's definitely not breathing. And Imsol's being held back by the cops. She's screaming his name as they carry him to the ambulance under a white sheet, and his arm falls out from under the sheet. And on his wrist is his watch. She sees his watch and remembers him asking why his watch became a time machine before, when she tried to explain the whole situation to him. And she couldn't tell him that it all happened because of his death, if you remember. And she remembers all of that. And she looks at her watch and then his watch. And then she wonders, what if? So she breaks free from the cops holding her back and runs to Sun Jae. She looks at his watch, and sure enough, it now says 3 on it. She decides that they should have never met and presses the button. When Imsol opens her eyes, she's in her classroom again, back in 2008. She looks down, and there's a yellow umbrella next to her. She goes home that day, and it's raining, and it's the day that Sun Jae finds her package at his doorstep. This time, when he leaves it at her house, she doesn't go up to him, doesn't interact with him, and just hides from view. So he never runs into her. He doesn't fall in love with her. That entire scene doesn't happen.
He's never seen her.
Yeah. After a while, Imsol's family moves. They pack everything up in the van, and Imsol says goodbye one final time to all of her memories of Sun Jae in that place. I only realized as I was watching this scene just how many conversations and interactions they had in that spot between their houses. Just as the van leaves with Imsol in it, Sun Jae opens the gate to his house and comes out. He never sees the people in the van, only the van leaving, and figures his neighbors must be moving. And Sun Jae is actually wearing his shoulder brace, which means this took place pretty soon after his surgery in mid-2008. Imsol completely erased herself from his life. Back in 2023, we finally see what Sun Jae was doing before he ran into Imsol. He was at the awards show to present an award. The staff gave him an envelope with the name of the winners on it. He takes it, turns around, and sees Imsol trying to hide her face using a giant flower. He witnesses her hiding under the table and stealing the purse. And he sees her sneak out with the purse, and he follows her. I'm pretty sure he bumps into her on purpose. She sees him and immediately starts tearing up. He sets her down and says, I saw you stealing the purse. Are you a thief? Imsol gets flustered and tries to leave, but he grabs her arm and threatens to call the cops. Imsol's crying by this point, and he actually sees her face then. And she also looks kind of mad. And he asks her, why are you crying? I didn't do anything. The same line. He has said it in so many different ways to her already. So he tells her she isn't going to get out of this by crying and actually starts dialing the cops. Imsol sees him distracted and runs away. Sun Jae has to go present the award, so he just lets it go because he's busy too. So Imsol goes to her car and looks him up. So this entire time, she's been actively avoiding him so far. She usually keeps tabs on him, and I'm assuming she avoids all the places he might be at. So she never heard about him attending this ceremony, which is why she even ran into him, or she would have never taken the risk of coming here. Imsol goes home, and her entire family is watching the awards. Sun Jae's on TV, presenting the award. Sun Jae announces the nominees and says, the Best Picture award goes to Super Duper Quick-Witted. At the same time, Imsol realizes that she has the wrong envelope. When they bumped into each other earlier, they both dropped their envelopes, and she accidentally grabbed the wrong one. So he just read out on live national TV the beginning of her resignation letter. And he looked so serious saying it, like he didn't even realize he made a mistake until a few seconds later.
At some point, he should have stopped, right?
He didn't read out the whole thing. He said the first sentence, which was super duper quick-witted, and then she put the rest like in the next sentence. So he read that, and then he looked, like he said it very seriously, and then he looked down and realized, wait, something's wrong. Because he wasn't allowed to look at the name beforehand. He only opened the envelope on stage after saying the award goes to. And then he looked down and read it out. Because it's not like he can stop and be like, wait, something's wrong. So the video goes viral, naturally. And they're at his house, and his friend and his assistant are making fun of him. There's even articles about it, trying to figure out what happened, or accusing him of damaging the prestige of the ceremony, or of being drunk. And the assistant is like, how did you make such a dumb mistake? You could have avoided all of this by just leaving the purse thief alone. Sun Jae's friend grabs the letter, which they still have, by the way. They still have the resignation letter. and reads it. And he says, I feel so bad for her. She must have been really drunk when she wrote this. Sun Jae takes the letter back and he's fuming mad about the whole situation. But he decides not to publicize the letter to explain the situation because it'll die down anyway. And he's usually not a jerk to anyone unless you really push him. But he says, she better hope I never run into her ever again. I mean, you know that's gonna happen. That's when they hear someone trying to key in the code to his apartment door. And it's the stalker again. Sun Jae opens the door and she runs away. Meanwhile, Imsol and her colleagues are in a meeting with the boss because they're trying to figure out who to replace the previous actor with because that man was fired for the drinking and the almost driving. So Imsol is distracted looking at all the articles talking about Sanjay's mistake on live TV, and she's feeling really guilty about that because it was because of her. Her best friend's also right next to her and also distracted because something happened at her kid's school and her husband is unreachable. That's when the boss suddenly stops right next to them and asks them who should replace the actor. Her friend panics and blurts out Sanjay's name. The boss thinks that Sanjay is a big deal, so he would never be willing to be a replacement for some other actor because Sanjay is a top celebrity. But they finally decide to go for it, even though Imsol tries to stop it. Because you remember that script I mentioned, Hero, with the really weird script? So in this timeline also, that script existed and they did send it to him, but he turned it down. And one of her colleagues is like, oh, remember when he turned down that script? He said he'd like to work with us some other time. And Imsol's like, he was just being polite. But all of them are on board with it, and they're like, we won't know unless we try. Let's just send him the script. So they decide they're going to send him the script and see how he feels about it. And Imsol's friend has to complete this task, but she gets distracted by a phone call from the kid's school and accidentally sends the wrong file. She sends the script that Imsol wrote, that her boss said she would approve and that she revised. So now everybody has access to it because she sent it to the entire team this morning because her boss told her to do it yesterday. And her friend accidentally sent the wrong file. So Sanjay's at home and decides to read the script. It's called Walking Through Memories, and the synopsis reads, a story about a man whose life was tragically cut short and a woman who travels 15 years back in time to save him. A heart-rending romantic fantasy about two lovers who fall in love over and over again as they travel back and forth in time. Yeah, she wrote their story. She basically wrote their entire story.
Does he recognize it or does he just like the script is what I'm curious about.
Okay, you'll know in the next two sentences. But actually, I wonder if that's what the actual Lovely Runner script looked like. Because that's what it seems like the actual synopsis of the show is anyway. So anyway, as he's reading the script, Imsol's voice is narrating it for us in the background. And it's so heartbreaking to hear her telling their story and all of the most touching scenes, like when he calls her in the hospital. And from her perspective, she wrote about how she erased herself from his life and now the man lives without any memory of her. And watching over the man shine so brightly from a distance, she thinks, I did the right thing. A song that only exists in her memories plays softly in the background. That's the end of the script, and then she wrote the lyrics to the song. Sanjay's song for her, which doesn't exist right now because he never fell in love with her. Sanjay does not recognize it, because that would be too soon. Then the show would be over. But he's crying by the end. Like as he's reading it, he feels something and he's crying. And he's so confused by his reaction because he doesn't understand why he's crying, but he just can't seem to stop himself. The next day, Imsol's boss takes her out to eat at a fancy place and drops the bomb on her that they accidentally sent Sanjay Imsol's script, and he's interested. Imsol's shocked, and at the same time, Sanjay's about to enter the room, but he sees Imsol through the gap in the door and recognizes her as the cause of his humiliation. And he decides he isn't going to do the movie anymore because he just wants to be petty, but he should personally reject her as payback for humiliating him before. He goes inside, sits down, greets them, and he's about to turn down the proposal when Imsol suddenly interrupts. I'm sorry, I don't want you in this movie. Her boss tries to play it off as a joke, but Imsol just doubles down. You don't suit the image of the male lead that I had in mind. It only reached you by mistake, so I'd appreciate it if you forgot about it. His first reaction is, are you rejecting me right now? And she even tells him that if he ever sees her name on a proposal again, don't ever bother reading it. She does her best to offend him so he wouldn't want to see her again. And he would actively try to avoid her as well.
But everything she says probably just goading him.
He is offended, for sure. You can see it. And he wants to keep arguing, but then he sees her clenching her fists in her lap. And she seems like nervous or anxious. And he just lets her leave. Because in that split second, he feels bad for her. Sanjay can't stop thinking about the rejection, of course. And despite telling his assistant that he doesn't care and it didn't bother him, he shows up outside Imsol's workplace that evening. He asks to talk to her, but Imsol refuses him and says, you should just talk to my boss about this, and walks away. But Sanjay pulls out her resignation letter, which he still has, and starts reading it out. And he asks her, do you really want me to talk to your boss? And he waves the resignation letter in her face. He basically blackmails her into having this conversation. So they end up at the bar in the hotel that he took her to before in a previous timeline. Sun Jae asks her why she's so against him. And she can't exactly give him a valid reason. How is she supposed to explain? This script is our reality? She would just seem insane. He even asks if it's because he mistook her for a thief at the awards ceremony, but that would be unfair because he even got humiliated on air because of her. She admits it was a mistake and apologizes, and he also apologizes for his behavior and gives her back the letter. Then he's like, so now that it's cleared up, you have no more reason to object, right? Imsol's adamant that she still has her reasons, and Sun Jae asks her what they are. So she repeats what she said earlier about him not matching the image she has in her mind, which is funny because he's literally the person it happened to. So Sun Jae asks her, okay, who do you want to cast then? Who is your ideal actor? And Imsol isn't expecting that question. So she just blurts out the name of
his friend?
No, a random actor. Sun Jae looks really confused because that actor is in his 50s. And with the time travel, the actor has to be able to play a high schooler as well. She just keeps arguing that she's right because she can't back down now. And then she's like, we can just CGI his wrinkles out. Sun Jae says, okay, fine. I'll believe that. What other reason do you have? Then she hits him where it hurts by saying that they need an actor who's better at romance than him, because his close friends always mock him for being bad at romance despite looking good. Then she says she wants a fresh face, and he's like, I'm not fresh? And she's like, no, you're not. He's like, this isn't a fish market. What do you mean fresh? I don't need to be fresh. Then Imsol says, but ultimately the heavens are against it. According to my shaman, if I work with a man born in the year of the horse, 3 generations will be ruined. Not just my family, but his too. He's flabbergasted. Then he asks her, do you really believe in fate? And Imsol says, yes, I do. I would never do anything that fate doesn't want me to do. She's talking about all the things she messed up which resulted in his death, happening much earlier than planned. So Imsol says that and she leaves. Sun Jae is hanging out at home with his friend, and the friend tells him, she must really hate you. Otherwise she wouldn't have turned you down like that. And the year of the horse excuse is ridiculous because that actor she mentioned earlier as her ideal male lead was also born in a year of the horse. Sun Jae once again starts losing his mind. He calls her up, and when she picks up, because it's an unknown number, he says his name, and she immediately hangs up in a panic because she's like, why is he calling me? Sun Jae's losing it even more, and his assistant is making fun of him. She must really hate you. She hung up as soon as she heard your name. So he makes his assistant call her and tell her that he's willing to invest in the movie, but Imsol rejects him again. It's not like it's a blockbuster. I think we can manage. Then he offers to do it for half price. Then he stops and says, no, I'll do it for free. And she keeps rejecting him. And he's like, let's talk in person, please. And she pretends to have a meeting and hangs up in his face once again. Sandra's having a meltdown about this at the salon and just can't seem to get over the rejection, but there's nothing more he can do at this point. At Imsol's house, her mom and grandma go downstairs, and when her mom looks away for a bit, her grandma disappears. She has dementia and she's now lost. So her mom calls Imsol in a panic, and Imsol asks Kim Tae-sung for help. And they're going through CCTV footage when her mom calls her to say that her grandma has been found. She went to a restaurant to eat, and she obviously had no money, and she kept eating because she kept forgetting that she was eating. So she would keep ordering more and more food. And the restaurant owner went to check up on her, and they found a picture on her of her and Imsol, and the back explained her dementia and had a phone number on it. So Kim Tae-sung drops Imsol home because someone attempted to kidnap a woman. He's worried about her. So he gets out of the car and he talks to her for a bit, and then he leaves. Imsol turns around and Sun Jae is standing there, leaning against his sports car. His first question is that your boyfriend? Which Imsol immediately denies, but Imsol is more concerned about the fact that he's practically stalking her at this point. She tells him to leave, and he asks, are you sure you really want me to go? You won't regret it? She turns around to leave, and she feels her coat being grabbed. And without turning around, she's just yelling, even if you beg me, you'll never change my mind. Let go of me. And she turns, and it's her grandma grabbing the coat. Earlier, when her grandma went to the restaurant, it was Sun Jae's dad's restaurant. And Sun Jae happened to show up to meet his dad. And he saw the picture of Imsol and her grandma and decided, I'm going to take her home so I can see Imsol and kind of talk to her about this again. So Imsol's mom shows up in the parking lot and takes her grandma away. But she tells Imsol, take this man for a nice cup of tea and thank him and treat him or something. Imsol takes him to a convenience store because she's like, oh, there's nothing open nearby. He's still trying to convince her that he should be in the movie. He points to his ads everywhere and says, look, they all think I'm romantic and that I'm very fresh. There's an ad for sweet coffee and also fresh meal delivery. So they see a couple of high school girls standing a little further away from them and whispering and sneaking glances at these two. And Sanjay's like, I've been recognized. We don't want any dating rumors, so you pretend to be my stylist. He calls the kids over. He's like, don't be shy. Come over. And asks them, do you want an autograph? A picture? What is it? And he's holding his hand out. naturally, as he's talking. And they slap some money in his palm and they're like, Ajushi, can you buy us some cigarettes?
They don't recognize him really.
They don't recognize him. He gets really flustered and he's like, and he tries to like subtly point to the ad on the wall next to him with the coffee so that he can be like, I'm a celebrity, do you not recognize me? And the kids are confused, but after a couple of seconds, they're like, oh. And I thought they would be like, they actually recognize him, but no. They say, oh, you can buy yourself some coffee with the change. Sanjay gets really flustered and chases them away. He's like, what do you mean smoking? Why do you need cigarettes at your age? Leave. And Imsol just bursts out laughing. This is the first time he's seen her laugh. So yeah, it's starting again. So they walk back to his car and he says that his dad told him they used to be neighbors. He asks her if she ever saw him before. And she says no, but then he says, I wonder if I've ever seen you before. That would explain why you seem so familiar. She does her best to keep him from going down that line of thought, and then she tells him to turn down the role, even if her boss offers it to him. And she leaves. He watches her walk up to her apartment, and he's watching her from the outside. Like he can see her walking in the corridor and walking to her door. And he feels this odd sort of deja vu, like he's done this before. And he seems to recall standing there and watching the lights turn on one by one. In the very beginning, when she went home in the wheelchair and he was just watching the motion-activated lights when she was going home, it feels like he kind of recalls that. Imsol goes home and she's telling her grandma that she should be more careful and you can't just wander off like that. You worried us so much. And then her grandma looks at her and says, but aren't you glad I did? I know you missed him.
Oh my god.
Yeah, but remember, it's happened at least a couple of times now, right? Her grandma has said things that hint that she knows more than she's letting on, like her finding the watch, like, and telling her, I kept it safe for you. And also randomly asking her one day, like when she came back, like, oh, you can walk now. Because nobody else would have known that.
Things like
yeah.
that.
Imsol is shocked, but her grandma once again forgets the conversation immediately. Imsol goes to her room and just breaks down because her grandma's right, she did miss him, but the more she sees him, the more she misses him. The next day at work, her boss tells her that Sun Jae has agreed and they absolutely need to cast him. And Imsol quits. Nothing they say can convince her, and she just takes off her work badge, puts it on the table, and just walks out. Her friend tries to stop her, and she even gets mad at her friend and yells at her about how this would have never happened if you didn't mess up, if you didn't send him the wrong file. She just starts crying and says, you have no idea how hard it was to cut him out of my life. I can't have him back in my life now. And she leaves the office. She goes to an amusement park. So they had a date at that amusement park earlier when they were in a relationship back in 2009. She always wanted to go there because her dad took her there when she was younger, but she never got a chance after that. So Sun Jae took her to the amusement park for her birthday. And they spent the entire day having fun. And at the end of the day, he took her to the Ferris wheel and they cut her birthday cake. And he gave her a necklace which has S on it. I don't know if it's S for Sun Jae or S for Imsol or both. I don't know. So they promised to come back again in the future because at this point, he was preparing to wait 15 years before he saw her again in 2023. So Imsol goes to the amusement park and she's reliving all of their memories and she just sits on a bench all day. When she finally comes to, it's already dark and she doesn't even notice. Like she just realized that the sun has set and it's been ages. She sees the Ferris wheel and decides she might as well get on the Ferris wheel and relive that memory too. When suddenly Sun Jae barges in and the door closes and now they're stuck together for the rest of the ride. He tells her that if you think I was following you, that's not what happened. I had a shoot nearby, which was cancelled, and I came to the Ferris wheel because it reminded me of a scene from your script, and I saw you. She's mad at him because she says, yes, you saw me by coincidence, but you didn't have to follow me here. You could have just ignored me and left. But he says, your shaman must be fake, because at this point, it feels like fate is bringing us together constantly, especially with us having been neighbors in the past and me running into you coincidentally often. Imsol's really frustrated. She wants to leave, but she can't jump off. And he accurately guesses that that's her thought. They argue a bit more, and he finally asks, does it really end like that? Does the man really live out the rest of his life with no memory of the woman he loved? What a sad ending. Imsol says, but it is a happy ending from the woman's perspective. She saved him. Sun Jae argues, but she lost the love of her life. Is the woman happy without him? It is a sad ending. She yells at him to not do it if he doesn't like it. You don't have to do the script. You don't have to be so stubborn. You must get a lot of great offers from well-known writers. And he says, I've been kind of weird lately. I've been having strange symptoms ever since I read your script. I tear up all of a sudden and have vivid dreams like I've lived through them. Even this place seems so familiar, even though I've never been here before. Maybe that's why I'm so drawn to this movie over all the others. Earlier, when his shoot was cancelled and he was walking around, he felt an odd sense of familiarity. And then when he went to the Ferris wheel and he looked at the Ferris wheel, he felt like he had a vague memory of running to the Ferris wheel holding a cake box. And he looked up and he saw Imsol about to get on the Ferris wheel and impulsively decided to join her. They're basically going around in a loop, just like that Ferris wheel. And she has that thought too by the end of this conversation that their fate will just keep going around and around in circles, just like this Ferris wheel. But right at that moment, the Ferris wheel suddenly jerks to a stop, and Sun Jae reaches out to grab her so she doesn't fall, because they're at the top. And his necklace falls out from behind his shirt, and his necklace is the one he gave her all those years ago on the Ferris wheel with the S on it. It's the same necklace.
This is not part of the script, right? She hasn't mentioned this in the script so
No,
far.
she hasn't mentioned this in the script. He doesn't know anything about it. He just has that necklace. So the ride actually stopped fully because there was some electrical issue, and now they're fixing it. So everyone's stuck on the ride. Imsol falls asleep just sitting up in the carriage, and they've been there for a while now. The Ferris wheel finally starts moving again, and Sun Jae tries to wake her up, but she doesn't respond. He reaches out and feels her forehead, and she's burning up. The Ferris wheel reaches the bottom, and Sun Jae carries Imsol out in his arms through a small crowd of people recording the whole thing because they recognize him as a celebrity, I guess. Or maybe they're just fascinated by the fact that someone's carrying another person. I don't know. He takes her home to his house and has a doctor come over to treat her and puts her to rest in his bed. She's still unconscious. She's got an IV in her arm and she looks cold. So he puts an extra blanket on top of her and tucks her in. And she subconsciously, in her sleep, grabs his hand and starts saying his name. And there's a tear rolling down her cheek. He doesn't understand why he feels so intensely drawn to her and why he's so sad about her being sad. But he just stays with her like that until his assistant interrupts him. So Imsol wakes up the next day, realizes she's in Sun Jae's apartment because she's been there before in a previous timeline. She quickly grabs her stuff and tries to run out of there when she runs straight into Sun Jae, again literally. She asks him why he didn't just send her to her house, and he's like, my house was closer, and the wait at the ER was a few hours, so you don't want to risk it. He tries to make her eat, but she makes an excuse and runs out, but her shoes are missing. Sun Jae says, oh, I left them in the van yesterday because I was in such a hurry. I'll ask my manager to bring it, but it'll take at least half an hour. So now she has to eat breakfast with him. He breaks the food up for her and hands her the bowl saying, it's hot, so be careful. And he has this flash of memory of saying the exact same thing before and shrugs it off as deja vu. Like he said it to her at that diner when he was trying to confess his feelings a long time ago. He tries to convince her not to quit her job as a way to repay him. Like he says, you can return the favor of me looking after you when you were sick by not quitting. I heard it was your dream to make a movie. Why are you giving up so easily now? Does your dream mean so little to you? She tells him, I have another dream. It's for the person I love to live a long, happy life. He's confused. He doesn't understand what that has to do with anything, but she refuses to tell him who this person is, obviously, because his first question was, who is it? And she also refuses to explain what it has to do with anything. So they finally finish eating, and he says he'll drop her home, and then he pulls her shoes out of a cupboard. He shamelessly admits to hiding them because he didn't want her to run off. And he was right. He actually knows her so well. When they go downstairs, they run into Kim Tae-sung, who's there to investigate a case. Remember how he mentioned a woman was almost kidnapped earlier? It happened near Sun Jae's house, so he's interviewing people and all that. He sees Imsol and Sun Jae walking out and asks them what they were doing together. But before Sun Jae can answer, random people walk by and they recognize Sun Jae. So Imsol immediately claims she's here for work and that they're business partners and he's gonna be in her movie. So I guess she's not quitting anymore. Kim Tae-sung offers to give her a ride home and she jumps on the chance to distance herself from Sun Jae, naturally. Sun Jae realizes Kim Tae-sung was the guy who dropped her home before when he took her grandma home, and he gets really frustrated because he thinks they're dating. He looks at his bed and recalls how sadly she called his name and how tightly she held his hand, and now she just left with another man. So he's like, I'm gonna wash the heck out of these sheets. What a reaction. It's like, in revenge, I'm going to wash my sheets. But then he sees that she left her medicines behind. They're still sitting on the bedside table. And then he uses that as an excuse to meet her and goes to her place that night. So he's in the car outside of her apartment building and he's practicing what to say to her when he sees her walk past with a stroller. And now he's scared that she might have a kid. He secretly follows her to the playground nearby and overhears her talking to the kid and realizes it's her nephew, not her own child. He heaves a huge sigh of relief and then accidentally steps on a plastic bottle, which of course makes a sound.
And Imsol looks at him.
Imsol looks at him, but she doesn't see him because he got so startled that he panicked and he hid So he hid behind the slide. So he doesn't even know why he's hiding. He just reacted. Imsol goes to check it out and he climbs up to the top of the slide to hide, but his phone rings and he fumbles and accidentally drops it down the slide. And Imsol is standing at the bottom. She calls out to him, "Excuse me, you dropped your phone." But he changes his voice on purpose and tells her to leave it. She looks down and sees Sun Jae's friend's name on the phone. And how many people are going to have that exact same name? Immediately, she figures out what's going on and answers the call. She puts it on speaker and points it towards the slide, and Sanjay's on the other end at the top. So both of them can hear Sanjay's friend drunk and yelling his name on the phone. Sanjay can't hide anymore, so he just slides down the slide. He pretends like he's there to use the slides because he's a celebrity, so he has to ride the slides at night. So Imsol tells him to have fun and tries to leave. But he's like, "Okay, wait. I actually came to give you your medicines. Don't think anything else. Don't assume anything. I was just on the way home from work and driving by, so I brought them for you on the way." And then he lectures her about being out in the cold because it's the middle of winter when she was super sick just 12 hours ago. But she says her nephew only sleeps in the stroller and nobody else is home, so she had no choice. Her nephew starts crying and she can't calm him down. So Sanjay takes over and he's like, "See, this is how you handle a baby." And he's holding him and kind of rocking him, but the baby immediately throws up all over Sanjay. So her nephew finally falls asleep and she takes Sanjay to her house so he can shower. Sanjay comes out of the shower half naked because he doesn't have anything to change into. Imsol gets really flustered and brings him her brother's shirt and tells him to leave. They're still standing in the living room having a stupid argument when they hear the front door unlocking. Her family's home. She doesn't want them to see, so she quickly shoves him into her room and grabs his shoes by the front door before her family enters. She hides his shoes behind her back as she speaks to her mom, and it's so funny because the shoes are as big as her. And then she rushes into her room before they can get suspicious. So Imsol's plan is to sneak him out after they fall asleep, which should be pretty soon. And Sanjay has to wait in her room until then. He starts poking around in her room and he sees the wind-up clock on her desk, the one she put in the time capsule before, so I guess she bought it again. She tries to grab it and they fight over it and they kind of accidentally break it. And he refuses to give it back because he tells her, "I want to get it fixed, I don't like being sorry." And then he sees a picture of her from high school and says, "It's pretty." Imsol gets all flustered and he's like, "I meant the uniform." Poor Imsol. He keeps staring at the picture and Imsol asks him, "Do you have a thing for school uniforms?" He's like, "No, I just think you're pretty." This man. He asks her again if she is sure they've never met before. It's insane how his soul or whatever seems to recognize her even without the memories. Like he has such strong deja vu every single time.
He has such strong affinity for her.
Yeah. Her family finally does fall asleep and she sneaks him out of her room. She very naturally grabs his hand and leads him out without even realizing it. He seems really reluctant to leave, but she kicks him out. And as she's shutting the door, he's standing outside the door and looking at her as the door's closing. And he has a flash of memory of them kissing, because he also stood in the same spot back then when she confessed her feelings and they eventually ended up kissing inside the apartment. So Imsol shuts the door and Sanjay falls back and thinks that he imagined kissing her. So he goes home and he's Googling, what does it mean if you imagine kissing a girl? Well, he does realize that it wasn't exactly his imagination because it felt off, but it wasn't a dream either because he was awake and he was completely sober. So now he's thinking, maybe I hallucinated. He tells his friend that whenever he sees her, he sees images in his head and they feel like snippets from a movie he saw a long time ago. His friend asks him how they make him feel and he says, a little overwhelmed, but also sad. And his friend tells him, you're in love for sure. You're on an emotional roller coaster. Somehow everyone knows when Sun Jae is in love with Imsol, even though it makes no rational sense. So his friend tells him, you're either in love or just crazy. And Sun Jae's like, then I must be crazy. And he kicks his friend out.
So in every timeline, Sanjay is just in love with her.
Yeah.
Absolutely romantic.
Yeah. It's
as opposed to what Imsol claims.
Yeah. So his friend was actually there because Kim Tae-sung reached out to his friend because he needs a favor from Sanjay. The three of them, Sanjay, Kim Tae-sung, and their friend, meet outside in a cafe, and Kim Tae-sung tells Sanjay that Sanjay's fan was almost kidnapped outside his apartment, the case he was working earlier. Remember that stalker girl who's always trying to break into Sanjay's apartment? She was the victim. Luckily, someone walked by and the kidnapper was scared off. She was able to give a description, and it's the original killer who created the mess in the first place. He was the reason that this entire story is happening like this. So it's that man again. So they think the suspect's car was captured on Sanjay's dash cam because he was driving by in the opposite direction at the same time. And they need the dashcam footage from Sanjay's car to find the kidnapper's car and the license plate, because they weren't able to see the license plate in the CCTV footage. Then Kim Tae-sung brings up Im-sol being at Sanjay's place the other day, and they both get really annoyed with each other, and they just get into this weird showdown. And when the coffee shows up, they start competing to see who finishes it first, but the coffee is burning hot.
This reminds me of the showdown that they had while running.
Yeah, it's like they're just instinctively always just have this feeling towards each other, even though right now neither of them knows why they're feeling this way. Their friend is just sitting there with his mouth open, watching these two idiots burn their tongues to oblivion. So Sanjay heads home and he checks the dashcam footage, naturally. And there's a taxi that passes by his car in the opposite direction. And he has a flash of memory of seeing the killer drive by in his taxi when he saw the killer's face. And he's also getting really intense headaches as he gets more of these flashes of memory. Meanwhile, Im-sol goes back to work and she agrees to stay until they find her replacement. So she doesn't say that I won't quit. She is willing to stay for a little bit longer. And Sanjay has officially been contracted to do the movie. They all meet up to have dinner to celebrate, Sanjay and his agent and assistant, and Im-sol and her boss and colleague. So they're discussing the details, like when the filming will start and all that, when Sanjay interrupts. He doesn't like the ending because it's too sad. Im-sol is adamant that it's the best possible ending for the characters. But her boss is open to getting feedback from the actors, especially the lead. So Sanjay says that a better ending would be if the man whose memory has been reset by the woman happens to meet her by chance and falls in love all over again, inevitably. That's exactly what's happening with them right now.
I'm not sure if he's actually realizing or not that that's what's happening.
I don't think he knows that's what's happening because he doesn't think this is reality, but it seems like that's the ending that he would want, because no matter what he wants them to be happy together. We finally get to see Im-sol's thoughts a little more clearly about the situation, because she says that would be the worst ending. What if the man dies again after meeting her, which is a valid concern? She's seen him die too many times already. And Sanjay says, we're all destined to die anyway. It's crazy how he thinks the same thing even without his memories. Their arguments are the same as they were before. She just wants him to be alive, no matter what. And he would rather be happy with her for a while, even if it means death eventually. She also feels like since it was so difficult to cut him off, if they fall in love again, all her effort would have been in vain. And then what even would be the point of everything so far? It is interesting though, you know how usually in time travel stories, if you just do one thing and it creates this massive butterfly effect eventually. And even like the MCU, just one tiny thing creates so many parallel timelines just from one different choice, right? But in this, it's fascinating how it feels more like
they keep making the same choices despite...
Not even the same choices. It feels more like every single thing that's happening right now is a result of a billion other things that happened before it. So just because you change one thing or two things or even 10 little things, it's not going to change this huge event that has been influenced by a billion other things happening. That's why even for her to change the fact that he was going to be an idol, it took so long. Like it was by her third attempt that it actually changed. And even then, with him just thinking, oh, she wants to see me on stage, it starts happening again. So it is fascinating because usually the time travel approach in any story I've seen is you change one thing and then it's so different by the end. But this, the same types of things, like even the places where they live, the kind of cars they drive, the people that they keep interacting with and their environment, everything tends to be the same unless they actively go back and change it. So after the dinner with the boss and everyone else, she's walking home and Sanjay follows her. He wanted to give her a ride home, but he didn't bring his car. So he wants to walk her to a taxi at least. And he tells her that. He asks her again if she has a boyfriend, and he wants to know her relationship with Kim Tae-sung. Im-sol asks, why do you want to know? And Sanjay says, I don't know, maybe I really have fallen for you. It's so romantic how open he is about his feelings. Im-sol's worried about this situation and tries to protest that he doesn't even know her well. And he says, it is strange, but it's true that I'm interested in you. He keeps thinking about her and worrying about her. She tells him to stop liking her because she has someone that she loves and that she loves him very, very much. So she can't be with Ryu Sunjae. The scene is just so sad, his face when she rejects him like that. But this is a first for me, seeing someone use a person as an excuse to reject the same person. So she apologizes for being rude to him and tells him to take care of himself. It sounds suspiciously like their last farewell. And even Sanjay asks her that, but she just says goodbye and leaves. Kim Tae-sung drops her home and he says that he's been feeling confused these days. He knows that they've been friends for years, but his heart is telling him that maybe he liked her before. He knows he didn't. He has no memory of ever liking her, but it feels like he did. He jokingly asks her out, but he's too scared to try for real because he doesn't want to lose their friendship. And he only told her the truth because they've been friends for so long, and he wanted to be honest about his recent weird behavior. Kim Tae-sung also knows that Im-sol has someone that she can never get over, and apparently he has no idea who it is, but he knows someone like that does exist. Im-sol reaches home, and her grandma is sitting in front of the TV. Im-sol greets her, and her grandma actually recognizes her. It's been a long time since her grandma last recognized her, and Im-sol's really happy and just hugs her grandma. But her grandma says, memories don't disappear. Everything you see, hear, and feel, those memories just seep into your soul. Even if your mind doesn't remember, your soul does. Im-sol recalls how Sun Jae said he's been feeling weird lately, and the dreams he's been having, and how everything seems familiar. And even Kim Tae-sung feels like he likes her, but he has no memory of it. Their souls remember, even though their minds don't. Her grandma says she's just traveling through her memories. Sometimes 3 years old and playing in her mother's arms, sometimes 18 and meeting her husband for the first time. And when she misses her current family, she comes back like this, traveling through her memories and reliving her entire life. It's honestly the most beautiful take I've ever heard on dementia and Alzheimer's. So Sun Jae has a meeting at Bond Cinema the next day, and Im-sol is officially gone, and he realizes that she really was saying goodbye to him before when she rejected his feelings. So he's really disappointed about it, but then he leaves the meeting, and he got the wind-up clock fixed, but he can't give it to her, and he thinks he won't see her again. He's about to get in his car when he hears piano music playing. And
It's the same song that he wrote for Im-sol.
yeah, he can hear the music in his mind, and he looks around and there's no sound anywhere, nobody else can hear it, but he feels like he can hear the piano playing that song. And in his head, he sees the lyrics that she wrote to the song in her script. So Im-sol's getting drunk somewhere alone when her boss sends her a file. Sun Jae created the song that she wrote in the script and sent a guide. So she puts on her earphones and presses play, and piano music starts playing while Sun Jae sings the song. It's exactly the same song it originally was. Same tune, same everything. And he's even singing it. So after recording the song, Sun Jae heads out onto the street, and his assistant leaves to bring the car around. At the same time, Kim Tae-sung and the other cops were able to find the license plate number from Sun Jae's dashcam footage and found the taxi company. They identified the suspect and got a warrant, but when they went to arrest him, he got suspicious and drove away, the killer. So now the cops are in a high-speed car chase with this taxi. Sanjay is still waiting for his car by the side of the road, and he pulls out the wind-up clock. He actually winds it up for the first time. He hasn't tried doing that before. So he winds it up, and it starts ticking. As he hears the sound of the clock ticking, he feels a flood of memories pouring in. It starts snowing, and he sees a high school girl across the street open a yellow umbrella, and he starts to remember everything associated with Im-sol. Remember how I mentioned Sanjay has been getting headaches as he sees flashes of memory?
Yes.
He feels like he's looking at Im-sol and runs forward, but his head is now hurting so much that he freezes in the middle of the street. He can't even function anymore because of how much pain he's in. At the same time, the cops are still chasing after the suspect, and they reach the road Rue Sanjay is standing in the middle of. The killer floors the accelerator. He's planning to run over Sanjay so he can get away from the cops. He isn't going to stop for anybody. When Kim Tae-sung realizes that there's someone in the middle of the road, and he tries to overtake the car and knocks into the taxi with his car from the side. They come to a stop right in front of Sanjay, and Sanjay falls to the ground. He now fully remembers everything, and he thinks, no matter where he meets Im-sol or when, whether it's the past or the present. So Kim Tae-sung pulls the suspect out of the car, but he escapes before they manage to handcuff him. Kim Tae-sung chases him down on foot, and the suspect runs out onto the road. This is a different road. And he gets hit by a truck. He falls over the side of the bridge and into the water. Exactly how Sanjay did every single time. With the dash cam footage and Sanjay's car capturing the taxi, it honestly felt like Im-sol may not have been the thing connecting Sanjay and the killer.
Maybe it was Sanjay and the killer directly being connected.
Yeah, maybe the fate was with Sanjay and the killer themselves. Okay, so what happened? It's not clearly mentioned, but from all the details, what happened is Im-sol moved around the time of his shoulder surgery from her old house. So because of that, she never ended up running into the killer, because she would never take that same bus route and she would never end up in that place where the killer would see her. So she manages to avoid that fate, and that's why she never became paralyzed, even though Sanjay doesn't exist in that timeline to save her. But it does feel like it only started after Im-sol and Sanjay started interacting again. Like even Kim Tae-sung's feelings starting again, all of that Feels like once these two interacted, it triggered the other set of events. All of these events seem to come together at the same time, but it didn't need Imsol as a catalyst for Sanjay and the killer to meet. I mean, originally I thought it was going to be the killer realizes Sanjay has footage and then attacks him.
Even I was assuming the same.
Yeah, that's what I thought would happen, but maybe because it's the end of the show, they didn't want to prolong it like that because they needed a faster resolution because this is already the end of episode 15. The killer is now dead.
Finally, I'm so glad the killer's dead.
I'm so glad, yeah.
We can focus on Sanjay and Imsol.
Yeah, there's no other way. Like, there was no... I feel like no matter what, if he was alive, he would have just coming back. He would have just kept coming back at them. So Imsol's in a taxi, heading home after drinking alone and crying over the song he once again created. And the news is playing on the radio station. And they're reporting on the man's death, and they say his name. And she finally realizes who they're talking about. She didn't know until this point because Kim Tae-sung never fully explained the case. So she didn't know he was investigating this man.
But she recognizes the man himself, so...
Yeah. But she never saw him in this timeline. He had nothing to do with her. So she immediately Googles Sanjay because every single time that man and Sanjay, something happens, right? So she's worried about Sanjay, immediately starts Googling him to make sure nothing happened to him. But she sees people posting all over social media about Sanjay being in a car accident. And someone comments which hospital they saw him being taken to. And Imsol gets out of the taxi, which is stuck in traffic, and starts running. Sanjay wakes up in the hospital with all his memories and rushes out of there. They're both now running towards each other. Typical Kdrama moment and very cheesy, but still sweet. They meet on a bridge, and Imsol sees him perfectly fine, and she's relieved because it's finally over. That man is dead. Sanjay asks her if she was coming to check on him, but she lies and says that she was just passing by. Then why are you crying? She pretends like she isn't and turns to leave, but Sanjay stops her. Were you crying all alone this whole time, thinking about the person who's forgotten all about you? I told you it was a sad ending. Do you still not want to change it? I guess it doesn't matter. It's changed already. And then he rushes up and hugs her. It's so cute.
This is one scene I would not like to miss.
Yeah. Imsol tries to push him away, but then he says her name, the way he always used to before. And she realizes he remembers everything. He's really upset with her for erasing herself from his life. But he says, I'm sorry it took so long. I'm sorry for forgetting you. That just hit me right in the feels. It's like, how is this man so romantic? He takes her home, his home, and he doesn't want to let her leave. They want to make up for all the time that they lost. He tells her, I'm never forgetting you again. Even if you manage to erase my memories again, I'll somehow remember them just like I did now. I mean, he really did. It would sound ridiculous if anybody else said that. I'd be like, okay, that sounds really cheesy and you're overestimating yourself. But I do believe Sanjay's soul would never forget Imsol no matter what. But then he says he might have never actually truly forgotten her. Remember that necklace with S on it? The one he gave her as a gift in the previous timeline?
And fell out during...
Yeah. The reason he has it now is because when he was somewhere for a shoot or whatever, he saw the necklace in the window of the store and just started bawling. He didn't understand why. He didn't know why he was crying. He didn't understand anything, but he knew he just had to buy it. He went in, bought the necklace. He says his mind forgot, but his heart remembered. It is so romantic. Like, I just can't with these two. It makes sense why everybody thinks these two are dating because their chemistry on the show as a couple is so good. And the romance itself of the characters and the story is just so good.
And none of the lines seem very cringy or the negative end of cheesy.
Exactly. Or like, even if they are a little bit cheesy, it feels like it's very believable for who they are, for the kind of person that Sanjay is and the kind of person Imsol is and it is true that they went through literally so many lifetimes and life and death over and over again just to be together. They have proven that they deserve to say cheesy things.
Everyone's rooting for them at this point.
Yeah, definitely. So now it's 1 month later and Imsol and Sanjay are officially dating. All of the bad things are over now and they can happily be together. So Imsol's busy with work and she has a deadline the next day for her script. She has to submit a script, which means she doesn't have time to hang out with Sanjay. She's working at a cafe when Sanjay shows up. He can't exactly talk to her in public or sit with her, so he just sits at a nearby table and stares at her. And he buys the entire cafe full of people desserts just so he can buy them for her too, without suspicion. That's so cute.
The ideas that he comes up with.
That's true. He is so in love. Like his dad thinks he's a fool in love. She gets frustrated because how is she supposed to focus like this, especially with him constantly tempting her to hang out with him and just staring her down. Her script is due the next day. So she goes to the library and he follows her there too. He's wearing a cap and a mask and they feel like they're back in college and secretly dating. But someone clears their throat and says, "Can you take your secret date somewhere else, Mr. Drew Sun Jae?" Imsol panics, pretends like he's her older brother, and drags him out of there. But Imsol really needs to get her work done. So Sun Jae takes her to his house. And eventually, after she's done, they spend the night together. And they're just so cute. Like when they wake up the next day, Sun Jae still feels like this is all a dream. He's worried that Imsol will go to another time and he'll forget her again. Imsol promises that's not ever going to happen again. Besides, I don't even know where the watch is anymore. He doesn't know where he lost the watch either because he lost it a long time ago. And they're like, maybe someone picked it up or threw it away. And then we see Imsol's grandma standing at the creek where Imsol first time traveled from. She's holding the watch, which now says 0 on it, and she throws it into the water. It's never explicitly mentioned, but come on, after so many hints, we know that her grandma clearly knows what's going on.
And she played a big role in it.
Yeah, and potentially had something to do with it. Like, come on, we got so many hints. They were like hitting us over the head with it. Sanjay decides he's gonna propose to her, even though they've officially only been dating for a month, but he's been in love with her for so many years, like more than 50 years or something if you add it all up.
Calling it dating for a month is nonsense.
Exactly. Decides he's gonna propose to her and picks out a ring. But his friend gets in his head about it. He tells Sanjay, dating is not the same as marriage. Did you even get permission from both your families? But the most important thing is that you have to keep it a secret until you pop the question. So there's actually an article about Sanjay's mystery date with a mystery woman, and everybody's seen it. It's from when they went to the library the previous day and they blurred Imsol's face because she's not a celebrity. But there is now an article about it and a dating scandal. And Imsol's worried about it. So Sanjay goes to meet Imsol. And they're sitting in his car near her apartment and they're talking. And Sanjay says he'll take care of it. And she asks him, how will you take care of it? But he can't tell her that his definition of taking care of it is announcing that he's getting married to the person. It's no longer a dating scandal.
It's supposed to be a surprise for her too.
Yeah. So Imsol sees Kim Tae-sung walking past outside and she gets out of the car. Kim Tae-sung came to drop off a present because it's her nephew's birthday tomorrow. Sanjay can't handle his jealousy, also exits the car. Imsol sees Sanjay pop up and pretends like it's such a coincidence for him to be there, but Kim Tae-sung already knows it's her because of the article, even though the face was blurred out. Kim Tae-sung lectures her about having to find out from the internet about his friend's life, and Imsol takes both of them out to eat so they can bond, I guess. Kim Tae-sung asks to be formally introduced to Sanjay, officially introduced as friend meeting boyfriend. Imsol leaves them for a little while. She goes outside to do something, and Sanjay and Kim Tae-sung are sitting alone. And Sanjay tries to warn Kim Tae-sung and tells him, you only dated her very briefly, so I'm not bothered. But he's clearly a little bit bothered. But then Kim Tae-sung says, we never dated. What are you talking about? Sanjay looks confused for a second, and then the light bulb in his head goes off, and he bursts out laughing. This is one of the things Imsol changed, so they never dated in this timeline. Sanjay's laughing because he's glad that changed. Kim Tae-sung figures that Sanjay was the guy that Imsol could never forget, and then they all sit and drink together. Kim Tae-sung suddenly asks if they've ever drank together before, because this feels weirdly familiar, and Sanjay flashes back to that time where they both got insanely drunk.
At his house.
No, it was when Sanjay took Kim Tae-sung out to drink instead of Imsol.
But this was in the past, right?
In the past. And they spent all night crying over Imsol together. And their friend just lost his mind dealing with them. So Sanjay flashes back to that and he immediately denies it. He's like, of course not. We've never ever drank together. Then Sanjay says, I never get drunk. I can hold my liquor very well. And immediately proceeds to get very drunk. And as they're leaving, he hugs Kim Tae-sung and says, thank you. Thank you for catching that man. Kim Tae-sung's confused. He's like, even Imsol told me the same thing. What exactly is going on? And Sanjay looks at him and says, you ended the vicious cycle. You ended it. So thank you. It is so sweet. Like just that moment. Anyway, they go home. Everyone leaves. Imsol takes Sanjay home. And as they're leaving, Sanjay remembers that it's her nephew's birthday tomorrow. And his friend told him to get permission from the families before marriage. So this is the perfect time to meet her family. He convinces Imsol to take him to the event. The next day, Imsol and her entire family get out of the car at the venue. She looks up and realizes this is Sun Jae's dad's restaurant. Her mom mentioned to her family before that the owner used to be their neighbor after her grandma came home. So her brother thought it's better to use the restaurant of someone they personally know and book the place. Sun Jae calls Imsol, I'm in the neighborhood, which restaurant is it? And she tells him, don't come. You can meet them some other day, just don't do it. And then she heads inside the restaurant. They run into Sun Jae's dad because he's setting everything up because it's supposed to be a ceremony where they put a bunch of things in front of the child and the child has to pick something. And it kind of predicts your future or something like that. Putting money or like a stethoscope, things like that. So when they run into Sun Jae's dad, somehow the topic turns to the love lives of their children, like Imsol's mom and Sun Jae's dad. Because they just have this weird rivalry. They just don't like each other, no matter what, no matter which timeline it is. Her mom tells him that after seeing Imsol, he probably regrets not introducing Imsol to his son. And Sun Jae's dad says, my son's dating now. Haven't you seen the articles? I'll have a pretty daughter-in-law soon. Imsol's mom doesn't want to be left behind, so she tells him, my daughter's got a boyfriend too. He's actually joining us today at this family event. Since he asked to join, it means he must be serious about my daughter, and they'll probably be setting a wedding date soon as well. They're both bragging about their kids and angry that neither of them got the upper hand when Sun Jae shows up. Sun Jae's dad thinks he's there to visit him, natural reaction, and Imsol's family are excited because they're seeing a giant celebrity. And amidst all this chaos, he hands over a gift basket to Imsol's mom and then bows 90 degrees and formally introduces himself and even calls her like a formal version of mother-in-law or something. So everyone's confused and Imsol finally goes up to him and says, I told you not to come. Why are you surprising everyone like this? Why not? I thought this would be a great opportunity to greet both the families at once. It's clear from their interactions that they're together. Everyone is shocked and then they all sit down with Imsol's family on one side and Sun Jae's on the other. They explain that the person in the article is Imsol. And her brother asks, how long have you guys been together? And Sun Jae says, I've liked her since high school. I was just too intimidated to talk to her back then. She's too pretty. So basically treating it like the official meeting that the families have before the wedding, the formal meeting. At least her family is. Sun Jae's dad just thinks Sun Jae is a hopeless fool in love, but he eventually approves when he sees how happy Sun Jae is with Imsol. All of a sudden, Eclipse shows up, the rest of the members of Eclipse. So Sun Jae bribed them with a new studio. He tells them that he'll renovate their entire studio and buy them an entire new set of instruments and gear to bribe them to perform at Imsol's nephew's birthday. They don't even do an original performance. He makes them sing along to a karaoke machine. And this part was so funny. I was like, what is going on? After the party, Imsol's grandma talks to Sun Jae alone and she says, live a good life now. Be happy together. Smile a lot. Live for a long time. And he just starts crying.
I like the grandma.
I know, right? I watched the behind the scenes and the scene wasn't originally supposed to be like that. Sun Jae wasn't supposed to cry, but the actor just couldn't stop crying because it felt so emotional. And he just kept crying and crying. And they decided, do you know what, we'll keep it like that because this feels so emotional. I think I prefer this version because wouldn't it hit you really hard if one of the people who helped change your fate tells you to live happily now and that everything's okay now?
I can't wait to watch this scene.
It's so cute, everything. So anyway, Sun Jae decides he's going to propose tonight. Like this is the day of the ceremony. It's the same evening. He decides he's going to propose. And he books a cruise, the whole cliche thing. He's planning to do the cliche Kdrama proposal, and Imsol suddenly starts laughing. And she's like, you're not about to propose right now, are you? Like a cliche Kdrama? There aren't going to be fireworks and your assistant rolling out a 3-tier cake with your friend tossing flower petals everywhere. And then she just starts laughing because she thinks she's joking. And Sun Jae panics and also starts laughing. But now that the surprise is ruined, he completely denies it. But then he looks at his watch and it's about to be 9 p.m. He needs to ask her now. He's like, okay, fine, I'll just ask the question. He opens his mouth and Imsol blurts out, I'm gonna make a movie. So remember how she quit her job? It wasn't all because of Sun Jae. She had a plan. She quit her job and rushed writing a script so she could enter a short film competition in the spring. So she is officially gonna make a movie, which is a few months later. And she needs to submit it a few months later. She explains the whole situation and Sun Jae is really proud of her for taking the first step. And then she asks him, weren't you going to say something? That's when he realizes it's 8:59 p.m. now. His assistant shows up behind Imsol, where Imsol can't see. And he's holding a card that says 5. And then he starts flipping the cards over. And it's counting down from 5, 4, 3. And Sun Jae's like, no. But the message is not received, especially because Imsol is staring right at Sun Jae's face. He can't really clearly say, go, stop, cancel. But Imsol can't see anything that's happening behind her. When the assistant finally reaches 1, the fireworks go off. So that's what he was counting down to. 9 p.m. was the fireworks going off. And Sun Jae immediately grabs Imsol's head with both hands while covering her ears. He's pretending like he's helping her keep her ears warm. And he keeps her facing him so she doesn't see or hear the fireworks. Imsol's like, I'm fine, I'm not cold. He's like, no, your ears must be cold, let me warm you up. And he refuses to let go of her head. Then he hugs her and then covers her with his jacket. Like he hugs her into his chest and fully covers her. And his assistant shows up wheeling a 3-tier cake, exactly like Imsol predicted. This time, Sun Jae clearly makes a retreat right now expression because Imsol can't see him. And the assistant turns around, but then his friend shows up tossing flower petals in the air, also just like she predicted. It's so funny. Sun Jae's still hiding Imsol in his coat. And those two finally get the message to retreat, the assistant and friend, and they quickly start picking up the flower petals on the ground. And Imsol is still in his coat with her face buried in his chest. And she says, I think I hear something exploding. And she's a little scared now because she can't see anything and he isn't letting her out of his coat. And he doesn't know what to do and he yells, "This is the sound of my heart."
So that's how he proposes?
No.
Is that his proposal?
No. At one point, even a drone pops up with "Will you marry me?"
The banner?
Yeah, there's a banner hanging from a drone. And they manage to wave it off. They literally wave it off like they're canceling a drone strike. And finally, the crisis is averted. He has not proposed. He decides, okay, this is not the right time. It's not going to happen. So Imsol gets busy with her short film and Sun Jae waits for her to finish. Every single day, he'll go pick her up. And they're really cute together, but she's busy. She finally submits her short film a few months later. And now they finally get to go on a date after a long time. They go back to that street lined with cherry blossoms that they went to in one of the timelines. And she tries to catch the falling petals again to make a wish. She wants to wish for her movie to do well because she's worried about it, obviously. He comes up behind her and helps her catch the petals again by holding her hands in his, just like he did before. And when they open their hands, there's a bunch of petals in her hands now. He tells her to close her eyes to make her wish. And when she opens her eyes again, she asks him, "What did you wish for?" And he says, "Well," and he looks down. And she's like, "What is he looking at?" And she looks down at her hands as well. The wind blows the petals away, and sitting on her palm is the ring he picked out before. He says, "From now on, be with me through all of my time." She says yes, of course, promises to be with him forever, and he puts the ring on her finger. They kiss, finally, and they see a vision of the future of them getting married, and they lived happily ever after.
I wish the last few scenes were
Much longer,
Longer.
right? I remember when I was first watching the show, the very first time I saw it, I wished there was like a 10-minute more like epilogue or something, especially with all the random people finding out about their relationship and how cute and funny it would be. But it still ended nicely.
Yeah.
I just wanted more of them. And that is the end of Lovely Runner. So we're finally finished.